A shocker in Columbus. Buckeyes go down 35-28, but there is still a season ahead, and it's time to pick up the pieces and move on, regardless of what some people may say. We got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports. We always enjoy the conversation with Pat, who joins us on a regular basis. And again, check out his work at 247's Bucknuts. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm good. How you doing, Mark?
I am doing just fine. So I got to say, leading into this game, I was surprised by how many people were so convinced Ohio State would win with no issue. And I'm talking about even neutral people, not even Ohio State fans. The only people that I came across that would give feedback to the channel or that I would speak to directly were Oregon fans, of course, that felt that even two Oregon writers came on here, really felt as though they had no chance. Let's just look good, put up a good fight, and go home. That it was that much of a mindset, and it was reflected by the Vegas line at pushing 15 points that Ohio State was supposed to win this game that easily.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to our Oregon writers. I was on their podcast last week, and the same thing. They expected Oregon to come in and hopefully fight and keep it a good game and make it compelling. But they all expected to go back to Eugene with Oregon having lost. And I think that probably speaks more to what Ohio State has done the last 2 years under Ryan Day, winning the Big Ten pretty easily both seasons, getting to the college football playoff, obviously playing in the national championship game last year. And I think what you saw is that, you can't just put on the helmet, put on those uniforms and expect that same level from Ohio State, for a variety of reasons, which we'll get to. This didn't live up to Ohio State games of the past 2 years. And it's interesting. I saw this stat on Twitter the other day. Ohio State, I think it's 5 straight week 2 marquee opponents that have come to Ohio Stadium that Ohio State has lost that game, which is probably just a weird coincidence. But, I think you go back to Texas, USC, Oklahoma, now Oregon. I think there's one more in there, but just a kind of a weird coincidence. But I think everyone kind of got a dose of reality in Buckeye Nation this week that this team, while still very talented, may not be quite at the level at this point in the season as the last 2 Buckeye teams have been.
Pat, I believe you forgot the one that Ohio State fans actually want to remember because it was against Virginia Tech in 2014.
Yeah, that one. There it is.
So if they can repeat what happened after that, then I think we're all good. So, Of course, the Buckeyes won the national championship after losing to, a marquee program to a certain extent, but actually a not very good Virginia Tech team that finished 7-6, but things worked out after that. Pat Murphy's on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports to talk Ohio State football. Tulsa's the next opponent. Of course, we're talking mostly about what happened against Oregon. Let's start on the defensive side because I think the last 3 drives of the game, Ohio State finally put pressure on the quarterback, got stops. Ironically, that's when the offense stopped producing and they couldn't make up the touchdown deficit. But the defense up until the final couple drives of the game was just non-existent from the standpoint of stopping anything or creating any turnovers, negative plays, anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think obviously coming into this year, there were questions about the defense with Ohio State's defense last year. The Buckeyes still made it to the national championship game, but I think a lot of it was masked by Justin Fields and that offense. This year, I think everyone knew the defense had to be better. You have a redshirt freshman quarterback who had never thrown a pass until 2 weeks ago. A lot of young guys, even on the offensive side of the ball. So the defense needed to get better. Against Minnesota, we got a warning sign that this was not the case. The Gophers were able to move the ball, especially on the ground, pretty easily. And, when Mohamed Ibrahim went out with an injury, they were able to pass and continue to move the ball. So I still had a lot of questions about Ohio State defensively coming into this game. I thought that there would be progress made and, that Buckeyes would be able to handle it. But Oregon puts up 505 yards, a really balanced attack with 269 rushing yards, 236 passing yards, and were really able to do whatever they wanted. The defensive line got little to no pressure, as you mentioned, until late, really when Oregon was just kind of trying to run out the clock and keep Ohio State's offense off the field for as much as possible. And, the secondary was okay. The cornerbacks, one freshman cornerback and Cameron Brown, who, while he is a fourth-year junior, has only played a little bit of football. I thought those guys actually played all right. It was the stuff over the middle that was where Oregon was really hitting Ohio State in the passing game. The Buckeyes linebackers were very poor, couldn't get anything figured out. Oregon scored 3 of their touchdowns on essentially the same run play, motion to the right, run to the left, and Ohio State couldn't get that figured out. And I think that's the biggest thing is the adjustments or lack thereof were so apparent in this game. Even before watching the game over again, you could just see from sitting in the press box, Oregon's running the same things. They did a couple pass plays where they got tight end. One was for a touchdown. One was for a big first or a third down conversion. It was essentially the same play but flipped. I think at least that's what it looked like. Ohio State just didn't respond. A lot of questions have been asked of Kerry Combs these last couple of days, Ohio State's defensive coordinator the last 2 years. But I think this whole Buckeye staff has to, defensively especially, has to, kind of look in the mirror here, because every level of the defense struggled to some degree. And, obviously you have some time here before you get into Big Ten play with 2 weeks against some, on paper at least, inferior non-conference opponents. But, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it needs to happen at all 3 levels for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, on the play that you're highlighting, the run play to the left, yeah, they seem to have the philosophy that we can bring a man in motion. That's going to bring one defender over to the opposite side of the field, and then we're going to crash down this wide receiver that's going to seal everything. And it was just wide open those 3 times running to the left. Yeah. Because of the struggles of the secondary last year, it's disappointing, but not a total surprise that there wouldn't be great play in the secondary at this point. The linebackers, for as much as they were criticized prior to, they were experienced players who made most of the plays and were in the right position. Obviously, those guys have moved on, and you got a new set of players there at linebacker. So not necessarily a surprise there. I think people are surprised by the lack of production from a defensive line that, from a talent standpoint, you would think would be devastating. Could potentially be the best line in the country, because 3 5-stars play on that line. To be fair, 2 of them are true freshmen who have never stepped on the field before, so only so much can be expected. But still, with Haskell Garrett and Zach Harrison in obviously 2 different roles and positions, but still that type of talent up front, you would think that the defensive line would have anchored this thing to allow the other 2 units to develop throughout the season.
Yeah, and that was the plan. I mean, for Ohio State, we heard heading into the season about this defensive line. Zach Harrison was supposed to take a jump and become that next former 5-star prospect, like a Nick Bosa, Chase Young type. He did make a big play in the game against Minnesota, but was more or less non-existent against Oregon. Was one of the reasons they were able to hit some of those plays in the run game, because he kept, I don't know if he was being coached to do this or if this was just an instinct thing, but he kept crashing inside instead of staying more to the outside, especially after they hit it on Ohio State once. Slow down the running back, allow other guys to get over after, as you mentioned, that block from the receiver. So, very disappointing from him. Haskell Garrett, again, was involved in that big play last weekend against Minnesota, but he doesn't look like the player that received an All-American honoree last year. You have to begin to wonder what difference Tommy Togiai. Obviously, he was a key player at nose tackle for the Buckeyes last year, but how much better he made maybe Haskell Garrett. And obviously, it's a long season. Haskell Garrett can still produce, but he doesn't look like the player the Buckeyes saw last year. None of the other defensive ends have really stepped up. It's been disappointing. You mentioned the 2 true freshmen, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimalau. They may be the 2 most talented defensive ends Ohio State has, but they're true freshmen. Even a Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Joey Bosa didn't really come on until their sophomore years. Even Zach Harrison, had a decent freshman year. It's tough to expect 2 true freshmen to be your star defensive ends. And at a place like Ohio State, you shouldn't have to do that. So, the defensive line, I think, was expected to kind of handle things to allow the rest of this defense to work. If they're not getting pressure, especially with a young secondary, young group of linebackers, inexperience all over both those positions, if that front four isn't able to do what it has done in the past, then Ohio State's defense really isn't as effective. And I think you saw that in each of these last two games, frankly.